Welcome to an overview of emotional interpretation. Now, we often talk about in emotional intelligence things like empathy, self-regulation, and certainly self-awareness. There might even be a preemptive area before emotional intelligence, and that's emotional interpretation. We are emotional creatures as human beings. We emotionally react to things. Let me give you an example. When you hear bad news or you get constructive feedback from your boss, let's be candid. Does it calm you down or does it get you riled up? Now, if you happen to be a parent with a child who's in sports and your kid doesn't play much, does it emotionally get you charged? Or when you see somebody do something wrong to somebody else, does it calm you down or does it raise your blood pressure? We interpret things emotionally. Let me also plant a seed. We tend to take things out of context and make them our own. We also do something else. We tend to want to get answers we want to hear. In our childhoods, what did we do? We'd go up to mom and say, "Mom, can I stay up till 10?" Mom would say, "No." Did we go to bed? No. We went and looked for dad. So we tend to interpret things emotionally, not rationally, not logically, not factually, and certainly not all the time. This is about emotional interpretation. It involves attaching meaning to emotions. Are they justified? Do we have the appropriate response? Now, we're going to look at an emotional interpretation traveling view of communication. So when someone gives us a message and we listen, so we're at stage one, are we really listening? Do we start the spinning process? Do we start to put our own narrative on that message? And then we tend to share it. It has been statistically identified that when we hear negative news or we hear something that is negative, we tell up to 23 people. When we hear positive news, we only tell 3 people. So when we get information, and I want to give you a quick story, and I'm going to be at about the middle of stage 2, and I actually stopped the process and helped it employ. We had a client by the name of Emily, and she went in for an interview, and she was on the shop floor, but she was going for an office job. She was not qualified for the job. And she was in the lunchroom. I was standing behind her, and she started to deliver the message. And 3 other ladies were listening, and they were kind of attentive. And all of a sudden, I was standing behind her. She turned around. She said, "Oh, I didn't know you were there." The 3 other ladies dissipated and walked their separate way. The process had started. She was saying things like, "The interview was unfair. He attacked me." Someone attacked her. So I asked her, I said, "Well, how did he attack you?" "Well, I just felt." Let me stop there. Notice the response. I felt. She was upset. She was angry. She knew she wasn't going to get the job. So instead of saying, "You know what? Great experience. I'm going to look in the mirror. I'm going to up my game and I'm going to apply again," she started to transfer the ownership to the person who interviewed her, who, by the way, was giving her a chance. So she listened. She spun things out of control, and she started to share in the lunchroom to these 3 ladies. Then something interesting happened. The 3 ladies left. The message was about to be re-delivered. Those 3 ladies were now going to start telling other people, and other people were going to listen, and they were probably going to spin. And Emily said, "Oh, this guy attacked me. He was awful. He didn't give me a chance." She was in the interview. She was being given a chance. She was emotionally interpreting. She was spinning things out of control and sharing it. So when I stopped her and I said, "Well, how did he attack you?" She said, "Well, I just felt." 4 times she responded that way. I said, "Emily, without saying how you felt, how did he attack you?" "Well, he didn't really attack me per se," was her last response. I said, "I want to challenge you on something. You just told 3 ladies. If they go and tell 4 people by about 11 a.m. this morning, there's going to be 12 versions of what you said. what is your comfort with the accuracy of how that message is going to be portrayed? She said, oh my gosh. I said, you need to go find those 3 ladies and say, look, I took it out of context. I was wrong. And then go back to the person who interviewed you and said, look, I shared some things in the lunchroom. I'm really feeling dejected, and that was unfair of me. And she did exactly that. Do you know what the gentleman's response was? Look, I gave you a chance. I wanted you to really get the experience of the interview questions. I love that you exposed yourself to this opportunity. And I said, if he's in the mood, say, could you be my mentor? And that relationship exists today. So in stage 1, she listened to, you're not the right person for the job. Stage 2, she started to tell 3 people. Those people were going to listen, spin, share, and then re-deliver the message in stage 3. Was the message accurate? Was it factual? Were people even listening or thinking? Here's the funny thing. If people aren't listening to you, do you think they're going to accurately portray what happened? And what happens is this process leads to poor brands of people, assumptions, judgments, and quite frankly, unfair opinions. Now, I love to share this story. This is a volleyball team that I coached many years ago. And as you can see, my wonderful face is on their t-shirts. And we had one of our main mantras was to have fun. So the kid sitting in the middle did this on his own. And about a month into the season after them doing this, they all wore it to the homecoming parade. It was humorous. It was funny. And they did it at my expense, which I love. That's my type of humor. Here was something that was funny that happened. I was in our local grocery store and I was behind 2 women. And one woman turned to the other and she goes, oh, did you hear about this coach in Cedarburg? He made his kids put his face on a t-shirt and then sell it. And I guess he kept the money. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I did not initiate this. I went to the kid sitting in the middle and I said, how much did you pay for all this? Let me pay for this. I don't want that money coming out of your pocket. You're a senior in high school. And what was so amazing is that story was probably at about a stage 3. The message was re-delivered. It was spun out of control. There was no accuracy. There was no factual representation. So I leaned forward and I looked at the woman sharing the story and I said, is that true? She said, yeah, I know a woman in that community. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, I heard a different version. She goes, well, what did you hear? I said, I heard the kids liked the coach so much they did it as a prank. She goes, nope, I know someone in that community. I said, oh, interesting. And she said, well, who do you know? I said, I know the head coach of the program. Now, I had been wearing khaki pants and a regular sports shirt, none of my volleyball apparel. And I said, would you mind if I introduce myself? She said, sure. I said, hi, I'm Tim Hagan, head volleyball coach at Cedarburg. Her head went down. Her friend stared straight away. The cashier has never bagged a bag of groceries faster in her life. And I finally looked back at the first woman and I said, I know you're embarrassed right now, but can I ask you a question? I'm pretty sure you won't give me the answer. So who was your friend in our community? Oh, I don't remember. This is what happens. Information travels fast. So what we have to do is ask ourselves, are we in that mom versus dad syndrome? Do you hear feedback from a friend and then go to another friend so you change the narrative so you feel better about it? When parents go in and see teachers and coaches, are we really being honest with ourselves? Think about that person during your childhood. Think about that person who challenged you. Think about that person who really challenged you and went above and beyond the call of duty to get you to look in the mirror. Now, most of us can't answer that. Do you know why? Because in our childhoods, we would just dismiss people like that. So what we have to do is ask ourselves, are we logical? Are we factual? Are we spinning, not spinning? Are we judging? Are we labeling? Are we leading with our opinions? So what we have to do is identify emotions, understand causes, and make meaning. We have to understand there are many theories on emotional interpretation, but to be conscientious, to be top of mind, to think about the things that are causing that are critical. Because if my boss says something to me and I tell 3 other people and I later find out I was inaccurate, I can't pull back those 12 to 16 to 20 versions that are going to be spun out of control after communicating with the first 3 or 4 people. There are a lot of reasons. Past experiences. Certainly men handle things differently than women and women differently from men. There are cultural influences of how we process information. And certainly there are mental health concerns. I want to share something with you. There was a situation, I was in a board meeting, and I remember a young lady kept smiling. And they were discussing a very unique situation. And she knew some work was coming her way. And finally, a VP looked at her and goes, "Do you think this is funny?" And he got angry. She said, "Oh my gosh, no. Why would you think I think it's funny?" And she had something that was very unusual. She would get this quirky smile. She would get nervous because she knew the work was coming her way and she was processing, how am I going to do this work? I got to organize this. This is a very important thing. So 2 things were at play here. 2 different sets of emotional interpretation. So think about that. The gentleman then responded. He got angry. He didn't know why she was smiling. He never asked her. And the meeting started to get volatile. And so finally someone said, hold on a second. He goes, "Why are you smiling?" She goes, it's a nervous smile. I've done this my whole life. I'm really working on it. She said, "I'm just thinking about what I need to do because this is an important issue. It's just more of a tick or a nervous smile. I don't know how to describe it." And she got all nervous. And the gentleman who kind of snapped at her, he said, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry." So here's the funny thing. We tend to react to things. We tend to react to things emotionally, not logically. So there's many misinterpretations. We don't understand people. Let me give you a really classic one. Think about the really good-looking woman or the really good-looking guy, well-dressed, and all of a sudden you get introduced to them and they kind of look away from you. And what do some people say? "Oh, he or she won't give me the time of day. They just think they're so great. And they're just, how arrogant." And we really didn't talk to them. And we later get in meetings with them or have social situations with them, and we find out something. They're painfully shy. They're introverts. Boy, do we judge and label and have an opinion quickly, don't we? So think about your communication going forward. Think about the impact on relationships. Think about, are you listening? Are you rational? Are you factual? Are you logical? And let me give you one last bit of advice. Before sharing information, do you really know? Let me say it again. Before you share information, do you really know? So again, how do we get better at this? Take a deep breath before responding. Listen actively. Be mindful. Absorb information. Create empathy. Emotional interpretation is actually out front. We have to practice conditioning our responses. Verbally, non-verbally, body language, thought process. I'll never forget, as a concluding story, my son was playing basketball for 2 coaches and they never put him in the second half. And I was angry. And this is stuff I preach, but I was angry. And I took it personally. And they were all going out to dinner, the coaches and the parents, and I chose to remove myself because I felt emotionally I wasn't handling it well. And I felt I was going to say something. Finally, a parent evidently at the dinner said, how come this kid didn't play? And they go, "What are you talking about?" They looked down at their card. They forgot to put him in. It wasn't intentional. Now, I don't think I reacted well. I was emotional. I did remove myself. I practiced a little bit of mindfulness. We all get in those situations. So remember, when someone shares something to you, well, my boss said, remember, they may not be accurate. They might be giving you information that may not be accurate. Are you really willing to share it? Are you willing to take that risk? So let's think before we're sharing. Let's think while we're listening. Let's be that champion for each other and ask, so what exactly happened? Non-emotionally, share with me, because we are emotional creatures.